and events, including what's going on in the rock and guitar worlds, as well as some nerdy technical talk about computers and such that relate to what we do at our recording studio. That is Hop Pole Studios, coming to you live from Manchester, England. I'm your host, Adam Steele, and this is Hot Pole Position podcast number 30. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, at the moment, it's just me, and that may be temporary. Liam is currently boarding a train and getting on their Wi-Fi, and if their Wi-Fi is stable enough, then he'll be calling in, and he'll be on the stream as per usual. For now, it's just me, so if anyone wants to pop up in chat and say hello and speak about things, then now's a very good time to do so. I'm just going to make sure that Dropbox doesn't absolutely kick us in the face. So, what a week it's been. I've started filming for a course which is kind of under wraps right now, so I'll not say too much, but the cameras that I'm using, oh boy. In roughly 1 day of filming, I've used over 1 terabyte of footage. Ooh. And that's absolutely draining, and so I've been recording all sorts of instruments and talking about, something that I'm going to be talking about in the news today, because it's actually a pretty big week for me. Hello, people in chat. And it's a big week for me because, as it turns out, and a lot of you may be aware that I'm one of the kind of bigger names in the world of Reaper, which I consider to be a big competitor to something like Pro Tools. And as it turns out, the latest version of Reaper came out yesterday. Reaper 6, yes, ladies and gentlemen. A question from the chat already. So Greg bought Reaper at the end of version 4. Is he eligible for 6? Unfortunately not. As far as I believe, you get 2 full license versions out of Reaper. That may just be bad luck on your part, Greg. Sorry about that. I bought a license for Reaper 3 that carried through to 4, and then I bought a license for Reaper 5 which has carried through to 6. I mean, you've got to give it to them that they let you carry a license over for an entire version anyway, because that's a pretty... Like, no one else is doing that. Just in anything. So, yeah. Oh, hello to a viewer from Greece. Yeah. I mean, thanks for the subscription. And, yeah, it's really, really awesome that people are getting loads of feedback. The newer Reaper Basics tutorial has just passed 100,000 views, which is bonkers, especially considering how long it took for the original one to get to where it is, which is nearly 250,000. We're probably on track for doing that this time next year with the Reaper 101 video, which is bleh. Yeah, and it's, yeah. There's a lot going on. On a tangent here, you may have noticed, you may not have noticed, I don't know, that my voice is nice and thick and full sounding and sounds great today. And that's because I've switched microphones. I'm now using a Rode pod mic. And I'm just going to... There we go. I'm grabbing the box. This thing, Rode pod mic. This is the inside packaging. It looks a bit like something from IKEA. But I've gotta say, this thing so far has been absolutely great. I used this to test it a couple of days ago, was really impressed, and I've actually used it in a tutorial series in place of something like an SM57, and it sounded really good doing that. So, for the cost of them, yeah, the Rode pod mic is really, really good. It's kind of sounding to me like an RE20 or kind of like an SM7B, which I keep throwing around. There it is. Yeah, I was going to say I've got the actual foam for this is downstairs, but this this thing's heavy, and so's the pod mic. That's pretty heavy. But this thing is a third of the cost. They're like £100. No, I didn't get the mic from IKEA. It just looks like it because of that packaging. But that is actually contained in... It's actually contained in a much prettier outside that's got proper colour printing on it. But I suppose to save on costs, they've made the inside just kind of black and white. So the only processing that I've got on here, by the way, is I've got a gate, which I actually had to reduce by a good 10 or 15 dB because I didn't need it to be nearly as strong as I did with the previous mic. And also, I've got 10 dB of digital gain on there, which means I'm not blasting the preamp out. And there's a limiter which only catches the top dB or two. So in general conversation, it's not even being touched. I would really have to shout down the mic for it to start limiting. So pretty much what you're hearing is what's coming straight out the pod mic and into an Audient ID 4. So inexpensive mic, inexpensive interface. I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but my other half is hoovering outside of the door. And if you can't hear that, and we all know how loud vacuums are, that's a pretty impressive rejection on this thing. I wanted to get one of these or something of this type of caliber, which is why I brought the SM7 home, but that's not working. And I'm in this little room and I've got the boiler in this cupboard behind me, and it's not an ideal room for acoustics. But yeah, it really doesn't matter. And also for the first time in years, because it sounds this good, I've turned the interface to be half direct monitoring and half the rest of the sound. So I've had to change my OBS setup a little bit. But it means that I'm not suffering from that issue that I've had in weeks previous, where I'm hearing the headphones with a slight delay on them, which was really kind of screwing up my brain. And that's not a big deal anymore. Yeah, so... let's have a look. Yeah, ahoy from Berlin. Hi. And yes. Yeah, if it all sounds good to you, it sounds good to me. And so far, I'm very impressed. It says it's got an inbuilt pop filter. If I do this straight on with a bit of a pop, you do hear a little bit of a pop. It's not perfectly clean, but considering I'm talking straight into this thing, I think that sounds pretty decent. And my way, anyway, is to take the gain up a little and actually talk at the screen, so I'm slightly beyond pointing wind straight at the microphone. It's something that I've done for a long time because it means that I can read scripts and such without having to do the side eye at the script, especially in longer sessions. And it also means that, like I was saying, you don't get that puh thing. Oh, another viewer that talks in Greek. That's really cool, but I can't read that. Oh yes, hi from Greece. Yes, I understood that one in the Latin text. Yes, hi. 2 Greek viewers in one go. Awesome. So, like I said to anybody who's just tuned in, we may be expecting to see Liam at some point any minute now if he can get onto the Wi-Fi on the train, because he's been for some very important meetings down in London. Yeah, he says he's still in a cab, but we may get him in by the time the news happens. So yes, I'm trying to check things on my mobiles device. So, onwards. The podcast is live at 8 PM UK time on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, and also Mixer, and can be found afterwards as a podcast through iTunes, Spotify, and our own website, hotpolestudio.co.uk, where you can also see the latest videos from the YouTube channel and any social updates, etc. Coming up tonight, we'll be talking about what we've already mentioned with Reaper 6. Boss have got a brand new line of synth stuff. DPA are doing some crazy stuff with binaural again. Arturia are updating everything. Boss have put an entire amp in a set of headphones. And you can get a free VST that's basically children's toys. Oh, and Waves are going distortion crazy. So there's so much that we can get on with. So, how's your week been, everybody? Let me know in the chat. Question from Solterzo. Any benefit to having the mic above your head as used throughout film, TV, and broadcast? It's exactly the same as what I was saying with having the mic just off to the side for me. If you're in a properly treated room where you're not too worried about room sound, and it's partly a camera perspective thing that it looks like the microphone in a lot of Hollywood film studios is way up here somewhere. But it's not. It's usually only about, a few inches up, and it's still very much pointed at the mouth. It looks like it's miles away, but the way you have to think about this is, think about when you're on a film set and they use a shotgun mic from above. It still sounds great, and it might be 12 inches away, and as long as it's pointed straight at the mouth, then that's going to get a very clear, very direct sound. They do that a lot in voiceover studios because it gets it out of your way, which means you can move your arms around, and it means you can read a script or look at a screen. Quite often they've got a projector or a big TV on the wall in these dubbing studios so that you can actually watch footage back and look at the screen rather than having a microphone right in the way of the key action on the scene. That means that the actor can focus on acting rather than focus on the microphone, because the aim there is not like singing. The aim is to have a fairly realistic voice capture, but not necessarily this sweetened thing that we do in pop production where we'll get really close like this. That's not the aim in film sound anyway, so having this like 12-inch gap, yes, this sounds more quiet to me because this is a dynamic mic, but see how this looks like I'm absolutely miles away from the microphone? That's a film perspective thing. I can't even fit my outstretched hand in between the microphone and there, and it looks like I'm miles away, but if I do that, I've only moved 3 inches. Camera perspective is a funny thing. Next question. Oh, it looks like we're doing loads of questions before the news today, which is actually quite useful because it means that I can see if we can get the chief on the show. Hello to David from the Council of Davids. It's just me for now. Liam may be joining us very soon. Question: ID22 versus Universal Audio Arrow. Which do I prefer? I will always go with the not Universal Audio option. I don't hate those guys or anything like that, which is commonly misunderstood. What it is I refuse to get into the UAD ecosystem. I will not buy their plugins. I will not buy their hardware because I know full well that when you buy their hardware, you're then limited to using that hardware unless you spend more money on their hardware to get newer or more updated stuff on top of whatever computer you need for the production. You're then limited to spending full rate on their plugins as well, and you're in a captive system there. If you don't like it, well, it doesn't matter. If you need to go back to a project years later, you either had to commit all the stems at the time, or you need to go and get all the old hardware and get that working. And that kind of way of working is absolutely something that I'm dead against. I very much enjoy things that are native processing, where it's all on the CPU in the computer, which means that I've got plugins that are 10 years old that work perfectly fine. There are plugins that will probably come out 5 or 10 years from now that'll all be cross-compatible and work perfectly fine, because x86 as a CPU architecture, even the new modern versions, it's very cross-compatible and it's very open. And it's the way that I've always worked, all the way back to the year 2000. Not much has changed, but they live underwater. So yes, I'd be going with the ID22, which is a great interface anyway, by the way. I've used them and they're really good. Can I do a video about copyright for small artists? No. Sorry, that's not a subject that I feel particularly comfortable talking about, because it's very easy to be misunderstood. It changes all the time. It's different in every country. It's different from one country to another country. If you're in the US and someone copies your work in the UK or somewhere else in the world, it can get very difficult very quickly. And what you really need is somebody who is fluent in copyright law to do a video about that. So, yeah, copyright law is something that I will not touch, and I go and look for advice on copyright when I need it, because it's the kind of thing that changes so often and so quickly. In the UK, you don't have to worry about it as much, because as soon as you record a song and have some form of recording of it, the copyright belongs to you by default. Beyond that, talk to the Performing Rights Society or the equivalent in the US. Find out from them the state of play at the moment. Bitwig. Oh yeah. So seeing Bitwig gang in the chat. I haven't used Bitwig since it was very, very new. Probably should have a look at that at some point. But in the meantime, I'm really, really getting into Reaper recently. I mean, I already kind of was, but yeah, recently, let's get straight on to